I am Campbell Miller, husband, father of two, and feature film director with EWTN. Faith and Life tells the stories of Catholics living their life through their faith. These inspiring people tell us where they have come from and where God is taking them. In this episode of Faith and Life, I will be chatting to Father Adrian Farrelly. Father Adrian is a Dominican priest, native of Ardee, County Louth, Ireland, and he is based in Newry in County Down in the north of Ireland. Father Adrian tells us how a serious injury had him question his faith, but ultimately brought him closer to God. Father Adrian, you grew up in Ardee, County Louth, here in Ireland. What are your memories from back then?
Well, it was a great place to grow up in, and I have good memories of my time in Ardee. The people were so friendly. My father, he was secretary of the local chair factory. They used to make lots of chairs for all over the country and for Great Britain as well. And my mother, she met him. He also was the manager of the local cinema, and my mother worked there too, right. And that's where they met each other.
Father, you've brought some photographs along with you here today, and there's one that stands out, and it's this one here. And I take it that's yourself.
Yes.
Standing in a very large cup.
Yes. And that was taken in 1957 when my region in Ireland, County Louth, won the All-Ireland football final, the Gaelic football final, and they beat Cork in that final, and the cup was the Sam Maguire Cup, and that was brought to my family's house one night, and I was only a child, very young, as you can see in that photograph, and I was put standing in the cup, and then the photograph appeared in the local paper saying, right. Adrian filled the cup, with my sister beside it. So I take great pleasure of that photograph.
In this photograph here, clearly you're with your mother and your father, and
yes.
This is the rest of your family?
Yeah, this is the day I was ordained a priest, and that's my father and my mother, and this is my elder sister Marion, and my younger sister Grania, and my younger brother Ronan.
That must have been a very special moment.
It was a special moment. And I was ordained in my local parish church in Ardee, which was the first ordination ever in that church. So it was a very special occasion for the people of my town, and so I have very good memories of that day.
When did this take place?
That was taken on the same day, just outside the church in Ardee, after I was ordained a priest.
Was it a faith-filled home? Did the faith play a big part in your life growing up?
It was important. Like the church was an important part in our lives too. And we used to often go to the Cistercian monastery. My mother and father were married in Cullen,
right,
in the Cistercian monastery. And we used to always go up there very often on a Sunday for Vespers and
right.
Benediction, you know.
Yes.
And so I got to a good experience of what the monastic life was like and of the life of the monks there too. So that was an important part of growing up, you know. And
yes.
There were religious brothers. I went to a brothers' school, De La Salle Brothers, had the local primary and secondary school, and I went to them for my education.
And at what point then, growing up, did the faith become your own?
Well, I suppose I went through secondary school, and I had thoughts about the priesthood, all right. I was always impressed by that way of life.
So even in secondary school, you were thinking about becoming a priest?
I was, yes, even in primary school.
Really?
I remember writing to my mother when my brother was born. I wrote to her in the hospital. I said, "No, you'll have two priests in the family." And I was only 10 years of age at the time. I don't remember writing that, but the letter's still there. They have the letter. And so I must have been thinking about that a long time. But then when I went to secondary school, I became interested in science, and then I wanted to become a laboratory technician.
And what did you study then to do that?
Well, I studied science. I went to the Institute of Technology in Dundalk and did science. I specialised in biology, and then I was to continue in Kevin Street in Dublin to qualify as a full-time medical lab technician, and then the Lourdes Hospital in Drogheda would have taken me then.
And did you work then in the hospital?
I never got to that stage.
Right.
When I got the job, I felt very attracted to the Dominicans, and I felt the time was right to give it a go, and so I joined the Dominicans that time. And
so you never actually made it then?
No, I never
to the
did.
Hospital.
No.
It's funny that you're saying that was your path, because it was the exact same as mine. I studied biomedical science.
Yes.
And I spent 2 months working in a laboratory.
Yeah, very good.
And realised very quickly that it wasn't for me.
Yes.
And then again, at that point, my career changed. And this is just what happens with people, you know. So you had decided then that you wanted to join the Dominicans.
Yes.
What was it about the Dominicans that attracted you?
If I had been working in a hospital, I would have been working on my own a lot of the time. Whereas as a priest and as a Dominican, I would be meeting people, and I was more wanted to help people and reach out to people and to be with people. And the Dominicans, I was impressed by them, because the Dominicans did all sorts of work. And I felt I would find something that I would be happy doing with the Dominicans. Dominicans run parishes, they teach, they have missions.
Where then was your first year?
Well, when I joined the Dominicans, I joined in 1975 and went to the novitiate in Cork.
Right. And were you there for very long?
I was there for 1 year, and then I moved for 6 years to Tala in Dublin to continue 2 years of philosophy and 4 years of theology.
Right.
And they were very happy years as well, and I met good people and made many friends there as well. So I have good memories of my years of formation.
And then after Tala, where did you move to?
When I was ordained, I was sent to Dundalk, and I spent a few years in Dundalk, which was near my home of RD.
Right.
And that was suited me very well, because I was near my family. And then I was moved back to Dublin, to Tala, for a number of years. I was in Cork for a few years as well. And then I kind of became interested in missionary work, because I used to meet a lot of Dominicans coming home from the missions, especially from Trinidad and Tobago, where we had a lot of priests there at the time, and they would be telling me about the work out in the West Indies, and that appealed to me, and I felt a desire to go there, and I asked if I could go there. And I ended up there for 2.5 years.
Right. And
thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a great experience.
And you have some photographs here.
Yes.
Of clearly your time there. This photograph here, Father, I notice that it looks like a bit of a celebration. You've got a big cake and a spoon here. So what actually was happening then?
That was my birthday, and I had very good friends, the Marcanos in Trinidad. They were good friends of mine, and when it was my birthday, they made a special cake and a little party, a little celebration for me.
So you seem to have very fond memories from back then.
Yes.
And I notice in this photograph, it's a makeshift building, and there doesn't seem to be too many walls on it. So where was this, or what was taking place?
Well, when I went to Trinidad, I had the weekend ministry in Rio Claro, and there were, I think, 5 or 6 churches or outstations there. But the priest before me started building another church, but it was beside there, and it was only finished in my time. I got some funding to help them to finish the building of the church there. That's the new building there that we built, and this is the old building here. You can see how simple and how primitive it was. So when I went there first, that's where I was saying Mass until we finished the building of this church here.
The Dominicans were in Trinidad and Tobago. What was the need of the people for them to be there?
Well, it was a new church, and it was a new apostolate, and there were very few priests there at the time. So the Trinidad and Tobago needed priests to help them to establish the church. So at one stage there were 60 Irish Dominicans there running the parishes mainly, and one of the priests became the Archbishop Finbar Ryan, who was from Cork, and he had a plan to try and have a Catholic school in every parish in the diocese. So he did great work there, and he also started a seminary so that local people could be ordained as priests there.
And you were only there for 3 years. So was it your decision then to come home, or were you called back to
Well, I was
Ireland?
called back because they needed a priest to work in the retreat centre in Tala, where I had worked before.
Right.
And so I was called back to that.
And did you enjoy then the time in the retreat centre?
Oh, I did, yes. That was very enjoyable because it was people were coming, trying to get away from their normal situation and to get time to be with themselves and to reflect on their own lives and on their own spirituality. And we did a lot of school retreats as well.
And was there much adjustment coming from Trinidad and Tobago back to Ireland, having been there for 3 years?
Well, it was a great experience for me because it enabled me to preach and to talk to people in a different way.
Right.
And to encourage people, to take more responsibility in the church. Because I could see the people in Trinidad and Tobago were very much involved in the church. And I could see that even if there wasn't a priest, the people wouldn't let the church die. The people would take responsibility for running the parishes. And I think that's what's beginning to happen here in Ireland because of the shortage of priests.
So, Father, after you finished with the retreat centre, then what came next in your life?
Well, I was always interested in focusing, and focusing was a way of understanding yourself and knowing yourself, and I could see it was helping my own spirituality as well, helping me to know myself and how I was before God, and how I could invite God into different parts of my life. And so I went to All Hallows College in Dublin to study for a master's in focusing on Christian spirituality. And those are very enjoyable years there, and I learnt an awful lot at that time. And I went to the Focusing Institute in New York for part of that time, and it was just after 9/11 when I got there, and I went to Ground Zero and I saw the ruins of the towers and still smouldering, and it was
Really?
strange to be there for that.
Were you doing that full time, or was that part time?
Well, it was part-time because I was also prior of St. Saviours Dominican community in Dublin as well. So I had to do both together.
Father Adrian, we're in this beautiful church of St. Saviours in Dublin.
It's a lovely place, a lovely part of Dublin City.
And what was your role in St. Saviours?
When I came here, I was first of all studying in All Hallows College. I was studying for a master's degree in focusing, and I was also prior of this community, and there were over 20 in the house at the time, 20 in the community.
And it was from here in which you took that trip to Rome and you had the accident, is that correct?
Yes, in 2007 I went to Rome. We had a special celebration in San Clemente, the Dominican Priory in Rome, and they were celebrating Father Maluli, who was an archaeologist who discovered the excavations under the basilica. And also I went to Rome at that time. There was the canonization of St. Charles of Mount Argus, and it was during that time, the day after the canonization, I went out on the street, I think to one of the shops, and whatever happened then, I ended up in hospital. And apparently I was knocked down by a bus crossing the road, and I was unconscious, and I ended up in an induced coma.
And you have no memory of that moment whatsoever?
No, I've no memory of the accident at all. I can't remember anything. I've had no flashbacks either.
And the people that you travelled with, did they know right away what had happened to you, or
no,
did that take
no,
time?
no one knew. I was on my own that morning,
Right.
and no one knew where I had gone, and someone thought I had friends in Rome that had gone to visit and stay with, so they didn't worry about me.
Okay.
But in fact, I had no friends in Rome, and they didn't realise that I had been knocked down and that I had been in a coma in the hospital. And also I ended up in a life support machine as well in the hospital.
My goodness. And what were the injuries that you sustained from the accident?
My foot was badly injured, and it was dislocated, and I had a skin graft. I can't remember very much. I was 2 months in hospital in Rome at the time. I can't remember much about that time. Then I was brought back from Rome to Dublin, and I ended up for another 2 months in hospital here in Dublin. And then I was 1 month in the rehabilitation hospital in Dunleary in Dublin.
And you mentioned there that you can't remember too much from your time there in Rome. So did it affect your memory?
I did. My memory, I had a very bad problem with my memory.
Okay.
I couldn't remember names or people.
Yes.
The one thing I did remember was that I was a priest. I don't know, that's strange, but that's the one thing I could remember. Other than that, I didn't know anything else.
When you came home, Father, had you much rehabilitation to go through?
Well, for 3 years, I had to go up to the local Mater hospital and to have my foot dressed each week, maybe twice a week, because the skin graft didn't heal, it wasn't healing. And for 3 years that happened, and there was no progress being made. But still I had hope that things would improve, and people told me that things would improve, and people prayed for me. And during that time, the Armagh diocese brought me to Lourdes in a wheelchair, and I still believed I would get better.
Yes.
But after 3 years, the consultant came in to me, and I said to him, well, how are things? Am I getting better? He said, no, I'm afraid you're getting worse. And that surprised me. And then I said, what can you do now to help me? And he said, the only thing is amputation. And when he said the word amputation, it was like a knife going through me. I couldn't believe it. So I was in shock at that time, and I didn't know, everything was going wrong for me, and I felt I was in a crisis. And all that time I had hope, and I trusted in God, and I believed in God, and people were praying for me, and I felt that I would get over it eventually. But then when this happened, I began to really panic, and I began to think about my life. And all throughout my life as a priest, my main preaching was about Jesus as a loving God and the love of God. And at that stage I felt, where is this love of God that I preached about? And where's this God of love when I need him most of all? And instead of getting better, I'm getting worse. And I began to question this God that I was praying to, and I began to wonder, does he really exist? Because if he did exist, this wouldn't be happening to me. I wouldn't be as bad as I am. And I began to doubt, and I began to lose faith, and I really felt at one stage that there was no God at all.
So you really felt abandoned then?
Yes, I really felt that there was no God. And it was a shock in a sense, and I felt it was a revelation to me. I felt I was seeing the truth, and that there wasn't a God, and that this was life.
And was there anybody you could talk to?
No, I couldn't talk to anybody, because how could I talk to anybody and tell them that I was losing my faith in God, or lost my faith in God, or I didn't believe in God?
Yeah.
Because everyone thinks priests have a strong faith, and that priests never have problems like that, or that they lose their faith.
And that's a very impactful moment, definitely, for a priest. But you're sitting here now as a priest, so there must have been something that happened, something that changed, that brought you back to God.
Yeah. Well, living here, I used to go through the ritual of coming to prayers and that, and coming down to the church. And in the mornings, I would come down to the church, and I would see this young man coming into the church. I think he was Indian, and he would always come into the church, and he would go up to this crucifix here.
Yes.
And he would stand looking at the crucifix, and he would, as if he was in awe of the figure on the cross, and he would put his two hands on the feet at the cross, and then he would rub his hands through his hair or around his body. And I think in India some people do that. to get the grace or the strength from the image.
Right.
And he would do this every day, and that inspired me, and I envied him. And I'd say, I wish I was like him. I wish I had faith like him, because he goes in every morning before he goes to work, and he goes away smiling and happy that he's had this encounter with this crucifix,
yes,
with this Jesus on the cross. And I remember coming down to the crucifix and looking at it, and I was saying, what is it about this crucifix that makes such a difference to this young man? I wish I could be like that. And I looked at the crucifix, and I looked at the face of Jesus, and I looked at the feet of Jesus, and the foot of Jesus nailed reminded me of my foot, because my foot was deformed,
yes,
and the skin graft wasn't healing, and I felt I could connect with that. And even I would put my hand on the foot of Jesus, and looking at the face of Jesus, I felt that Jesus was saying to me, look, you think you're bad, look at me nailed to the cross. And that really made me think about the whole situation. And here was me, I had dismissed Christ from my life, and I convinced myself that God didn't exist, because if there was a real loving God, he wouldn't allow this to happen. I wouldn't allow this to happen to my worst enemy, what was happening to me. And if he loves me infinitely, how can he allow this to happen to me? If he was real, he wouldn't.
Yes.
And I really had believed that there was no God. But at that moment at the crucifix, I looked at Jesus, and I felt he was, as I said, he was saying to me, look at me, look what I've gone through. And I could see Jesus' feet nailed to the cross, and he was far worse than me. And that did something. There was a complete change in me at that moment. It was an amazing experience, that here was me moaning and feeling sorry for myself and regretting all that happened. And now I realise that the God of love was there. He hadn't abandoned me, and he was suffering on the cross for me. Yes. He went through his crucifixion for me. And here was I, dismissing him from my life. And all of a sudden I realised he is alive, he's there. And he understands my suffering. And he's letting me know that he went through more suffering than I did.
And that's an amazing story, and an amazing, I suppose, reconversion story. And have you been able to share that with others?
Yes, I've met some people, especially who are terminally ill, and I've shared my story with them. And people who are suffering in hospital and who couldn't cope with their suffering, I could tell them that I went through that myself, and I felt that God had abandoned me, God hadn't helped me. And I told them my story, and I could see the change in their faces, that people who are carrying their crosses of their own suffering and terminal illness got great strength from me telling my story. Since then, I've looked at the life of Saint Dominic, the founder of our order, and Saint Dominic was strengthened by his devotion to Christ on the cross. And there's a great painting of Saint Dominic kneeling at the cross of Christ, with his hands on the foot of the cross, touching the feet of Jesus, and the blood from the feet of Jesus coming down over Saint Dominic's hands. And that was Saint Dominic's strength. They got great strength from the cross.
Father, we're here in St. Catherine's Dominican Church in Newry, and you have this stunning nativity.
I love this nativity scene that we have here, as I love nativity scenes in general.
You have a collection, so how many nativities do you actually have?
I'd say I must have about 80 altogether.
80
and
nativities.
I started collecting miniature nativities, small little nativities, and then gradually people knew of my interest, and people started giving me nativities that they had, and nativities that they had got from abroad, or that people had brought back to them from abroad. So I've made a great collection, and I love the nativities. This one here is from Africa, and it's made by the local indigenous people from Africa, hand carved, beautiful. And this one here that I have is one of my favourites. It's an Irish nativity. I found it very hard to find an Irish nativity. And this is one that was made some years ago, and the images of Jesus and Mary are taken from high crosses and old monastic sites. So it's a very, very Irish. Now this other one here I have is a Russian nativity. and it doesn't look at the moment, but in Russia you have these images that you open up, and the first one here is Saint Joseph, and then this is Our Lady, and when you open it up to Our Ladies, and then you have
is this a wise man?
One of the wise men,
one
yes,
of the wise men,
one of the Magi, and you take the Magi and you put him there, and then you have one of the shepherds.
Right.
So you take the shepherd and put the shepherd there, and then the last one is the baby Jesus.
Lovely.
And the baby Jesus goes in front. And I like this because children love these.
This one here now, is this Chinese?
Yeah, this is from China, made by the Chinese people, all hand carved in a Chinese wood, a light wood, and the figures are very Chinese.
Now, we've bypassed this small one here.
Yes.
Where is this one from?
Well, that's from Africa, and you can see it's a little African hut, which is, and they're at the front of the hut, and I think you can put a candle under it. If you lift it up, you put a candle underneath on the base, and the smoke or the heat comes out through the chimney. Here's one I got in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, they make these little nativity scenes out of olive wood.
That's beautiful.
Very often they're hand carved out of olive wood, and that's and that olive wood would have been grown near Bethlehem. So I think a little crib like that's very important and very significant that it comes from the place where Jesus was born. And very often when I give presents, I give people gifts of nativities as well, and young people, young married couples that I know, and they love that. And I think it's lovely to have nativity in a new house when you've moved into a new house, to have it there for Christmas.